7.4 Protein Consumption and Health. Compare the percentages of calories that proteins contribute in a typical American diet to my AMDR for protein. Identify food groups that contribute most of the protein in a typical American diet. Identify chronic diseases associated with processed meat consumption. Protein consumption patterns. The acceptable macronutrient distribution range, which we've talked about for carbs and we've talked about for lipids, for protein is 10 to 35% of our energy intake. Protein provides about 16% of the average American's daily energy intake. Meat, fish, poultry, dairy, and eggs provide most of our protein, 70 to 85% of that 16%. And plant food sources like our grains, our beans, our legumes, our peas, our nuts supply 20 to 30%. So when we look over here, 1999 compared to 2015 to 16, you'll notice that our unprocessed red meat has actually reduced quite a bit. As far as grams a day, instead of being almost 50, we're closer to about 35 now. In 2015-16, so about 10 years ago. Unprocessed poultry has actually gone up as far as consumption. Fish and shellfish, about the same. With processed meat, though, it's gone up slightly. So, high amounts of red or processed meat is associated with an increased risk of cardiovascular disease and some forms of cancer. Processed meat contains a lot of saturated fat, which we already know. It also contains a lot of sodium because they usually use sodium to preserve it. Both of these things increase our risk of cardiovascular disease. We know saturated fats can become plaques. We know that salt increases our blood pressure by increasing the amount of fluid being held in our body. Scientific evidence links red and processed meat intake also to colorectal, pancreatic, and stomach cancers. In 2015 to 2016, nearly 25% of the meat consumed by Americans was going to be processed meat. So, when it comes to MyPlate and their recommendations for protein intake, we want to choose lean or low-fat protein foods. So, eggs, fish, poultry, and if you're going to eat meat, make it lean. Lean cuts of beef are going to be things like top round or top sirloin. Extra lean, if you're going to get ground beef, that's usually 95% to 96% lean. Lean cuts of pork, things that are labeled as tenderloin, are going to be healthier because they're going to contain less saturated fat. If you do see fat on your protein, you want to kind of trim it off and get it off of your protein before you actually eat it. Limit the intake of processed meats for sandwiches. Vary your protein choices. Choose more fish and protein-rich plant protein sources. For example, dry beans, split peas, seeds, nuts, and soy products. You don't want all of your intake to be red meat. Okay? Even poultry is a better option. But having fish is also a very good option if you like fish. Nutritional labeling for proteins. We're going to explain how to use the Nutrition Facts panel to determine the grams of protein in a serving of a packaged food. We're going to explain how you can use the ingredients list on a food label to determine the quality of the protein in the product. So it's easy to determine how much protein is in a packaged food product by reading the Nutrition Facts panel because it's listed. Protein, 13 grams, can't miss it. The FDA doesn't require food manufacturers to include information about the percent daily value when it comes to food is intended for adult consumption. If the product label has a claim about the product's protein content, they do, however, have to display that percent daily value. Because Americans consume so much protein, it really isn't a nutrient of public health concern. We consume enough that we're getting what we need as far as protein goes. Something to keep in mind, though, is there isn't a listing for the quality of the protein, but you can judge it from the listed ingredients. Chickpeas, red bell pepper, spinach, carrots, quinoa. Remember, quinoa was one of those that was a high quality protein, plant protein. We also have the chicken breast that's in here. Again, the meats, the animal products will be one of the high quality proteins. We've got olive oil, salt, lemon juice, whatever, but notice the chicken breast is not the first thing on the list, which means there is less of the chicken in here. We've got two kind of high quality protein items, but they're not listed first, which means the quantity of them isn't going to be as high as the chickpeas, the red bell pepper, the spinach, and the carrots. Okay, economical considerations. Describe ways people can reduce the amount of meat in their diet without sacrificing protein quality. The issue that we have a lot of the time is that when we're trying to eat healthy, we tend to forget that there are times when we're going to need to really research what kind of protein we're getting from the plant products that we have so that we make sure that we're getting all of our essential amino acids as well. Explain how using mixtures of food with complementary proteins can help reduce animal protein intake. So animal foods, including eggs and milk products, supply over 85% of protein in the American diet. You may be able to reduce your food costs and reap substantial health benefits by reducing your animal protein intake and increase consumption of plant foods. You can substitute eggs, milk, cheese, and yogurt for meat, fish, and poultry. Milk is, again, still an animal product. So is cheese. So are eggs. So you're still getting the benefits of getting all of your amino acids, but you're not getting, I said that wrong. Yeah, I did say it right. So you're not getting the saturated fat from meat. Even poultry can be fatty, so just be aware of that. And depending on what kind of fish you're eating, some of those are just as fatty. So again, you've got to be aware of that. Make meals that contain less animal protein and more plant protein. By mixing plant and animal sources of protein, you extend the quality of protein in the meal. Include more legumes in meals. So for example, in chili, you can include beans in there. You can include, I know this is going to sound probably weird, but peas in there if you want to. And by doing that, you're increasing your protein content, but you're reducing the meat. So combining complementary proteins. So complementary combinations are mixing certain plant foods in order to provide all of the essential amino acids without adding animal protein. Amino acids that are often low or limiting in plant products. So legumes are going to be low in methionine or cysteine. Again, these are going to be our essential amino acids. Seeds and tree nuts are going to be low in lysine, but notice they're not low in methionine and cysteine. Grains are going to be low in lysine as well, sometimes tryptophan or threonine. So if you combine legumes with grains and seeds and or nuts to provide a more rounded essential amino acid intake, they don't all lack the same thing. Legumes don't lack lysine. So if I include legumes with seeds and tree nuts, then I'm kind of replacing one for the other. I'm getting the lysine from the legumes and I'm getting the methionine and cysteine from the seeds and tree nuts. Does that make sense? So complementary protein dishes, red beans and rice, peanut or soy nut butter on a bagel sprinkled with wheat germ. Hummus is mashed chickpeas or garbanzo beans with sesame seeds or tahini, which is ground sesame seed paste. Hummus on whole grain pita bread, black beans and cornmeal tortillas, split pea soup with toasted whole wheat bread. Again, I'm taking things that might be lacking in one category, but replacing them with something that may have something lacking in this category, but this one replaces it. I hope that makes sense too. You can watch the video, Complementary Proteins, again. It will be at the end of this, but it'll also be in your ebook. Okay, I need water. I've been talking for a while. Sorry. So complementary combinations. Seeds and tree nuts. The primary limiting amino acids for these is lysine. Sesame seed, sunflower seed, kernels, pumpkin seeds, cashews, pistachios, walnuts, pine nuts, almonds. These are all going to be lacking in lysine. When we talk about grains, lysine and sometimes tryptophan and threonine, like I said before. So these are going to be wheat and products made by wheat flour, rice, oats, millet, barley, bulgur, corn and products made from corn. Legumes, though, are going to be lacking in methionine and cysteine, split peas, peanuts and peanut butter, soybeans, soy products, and other mature beans. If you look at my plate here, I've got carrots, I don't know why I'm pointing, you can't see that. I've got carrots, I've got onions, but I've got the seeds and tree nuts, I've got my legumes, I've got edamame, I've got grains. By having this kind of diverse combination, I'm making sure that I'm covering all my bases. Now let's talk vegetarianism. Vegetarians are people who rely heavily on plant foods and may not include some animal foods in their or may not include some animal foods in their diet. Sorry. Some. And I don't know why I made that capitalized. Okay, vegetarians are people who rely heavily on plant foods and may not include some animal foods in their diet. 5% of Americans are vegetarian. 3% are going to be avoiding any animal food at all. So any food that comes from an animal source, they don't eat it. Why would you become a vegetarian? Well, sometimes it's religious. Sometimes it's an ethical thing. You don't want to eat animals. Others are philosophical beliefs that don't support the practice of killing and eating animals. Sometimes it's concern for the environment and economics. Plant foods are generally less expensive than animal foods. And when it comes to the environment, a lot of what we grow is to support animals on farms and things like that. I'm not saying I'm a vegetarian, I'm just explaining. Some falsely believe humans are not physically able to digest animal foods, but that is false. We are what you would call an omnivore. An omnivore is somebody that eats meat and eats plant. So you eat animal and you eat plant products, and our body is perfectly capable of processing both. Now, let's look at the different types of vegetarian diets. A semi-vegetarian, a flexitarian, eats pretty much everything except for red meat. A lacto-vegetarian, milk and milk products are acceptable, but no animal flesh or eggs. An ovo-vegetarian will eat eggs, but no other animal foods. So milk is out, cheese is out, but eggs are okay. A lacto-ovo-vegetarian will have milk and milk products and eggs, but nothing else as far as animal products. A pescatarian will have fish and shellfish, but no other animal foods. So again, no milk, no eggs, no red meat, no pork, no poultry. There we go. A vegan, nothing from animals. So in this case, we're saying no eggs, no milk or milk products, no beef, chicken, fish, shellfish, nothing. A fruitarian is no animal foods and nuts and seeds only. Somebody who is on a macrobiotic diet, there are no animal foods. They'll eat organically grown whole grains, fruits, and vegetables and soups made from vegetables like seaweed, grains, beans, and miso. Is it healthy to be a vegan? It can be. I'm not going to lie, it can be. But there are some things that you kind of got to consider. Benefits, it is definitely a diet that is going to be lower in saturated fat. It's going to be lower in cholesterol and energy than our Western diet that has a lot of red meat and animal product in it. there is a lower risk of obesity when you are a vegetarian. There's a lower risk of type 2 diabetes. There's a lower risk of high blood pressure. There are even lower risks of certain cancers. They do tend to be leaner. However, vegans also tend to kind of adopt a healthier lifestyle. If you are vegan, you usually are somebody who exercises, who practices things like meditation. They avoid tobacco and drinking of excess alcohol, meaning that it may not only be the diet that's keeping them lean. The dietary benefits are going to be that you are consuming more fiber, you've got soy protein, you've got plenty of folate, beta-carotene, vitamin E and C, and minerals like potassium and magnesium in your diet. So these are the benefits. Let's talk about the hazards. Your diet may not contain enough B21 and D, the minerals like iron and calcium, or omega-3 fatty acids. Plants often contain biochemicals that interfere with the body's absorption of minerals as well, particularly iron, zinc, not zinc, and calcium. So that can be an issue if you're trying to maintain healthy vitamins. Now, the body is also at this point not going to be able to make DHA and EPA from the alpha-linolenic acid from omega-3, because again, you're lacking this in your diet. If you are going to be a vegan, I have no judgment about that. You just have to be smart while you're doing it, making sure that you're getting all of the nutrients that you need. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people who claim to be vegan who will do things like they eat pasta every day. Pasta is a carb. There is very little health benefit to it. Even if you're getting whole wheat pasta and that is all you're eating, or rice, they eat rice all the time. Okay, what else do you have in that rice? Because there are things that we have to have in our diet that are coming from, because we're omnivores, the meat products that or the animal products we're supposed to be consuming. Calcium is one of those things that we should probably be getting from milk. So what are you going to do? Well, you have to replace it in some way. You have to be smart about being a vegan. So again, the advantages. It's high in vitamin C, E, and folate, beta-carotene, fiber, magnesium, and potassium. However, it is low in fat. And remember, we've got vitamins that have to piggyback on the fat to get into our body. It's also low in cholesterol, which again is something that we do need, but we're not getting excess when we're vegan. I hope that makes sense. Possible disadvantage, it's low in B12. I put 21, didn't I? Okay, 12. And D, I'll fix it. It's low in iron, zinc, and calcium, omega-3 fatty acids, certain essential amino acids. This is especially important in children who are still growing. And energy-wise, it's an issue for children because fiber tends to make us full faster. And for kids, they can't eat enough to meet the energy requirement of their body. So in children, considering for children, teens, pregnant, or lactating females. Okay, so for kids, they have higher protein and energy needs per pound of body weight than adults do. You got to remember, with kids, they're growing. Children are growing, they're making new muscle, they're making new bone, they're doing something that as adults we don't do. Remember, plant foods add bulk to the diet, meaning vegan children are likely to eat far less food because they become full faster. This ultimately means that they're not able to eat enough plant food to meet their protein, micronutrient, and energy needs. This means a nutritionally adequate diet, planning, and monitoring growth rates. Those are both really necessary if you're going to have a kid who's going to be a vegan or a vegetarian. You have to pay attention or you're going to hurt a child. Now, again, I'm not saying it's impossible for a kid to be on a vegetarian diet. That is not what I'm saying. What I am saying, though, is you've got to pay attention. For teens, it can be a healthy practice because they eat more fruits and vegetables, as well as they're having less fat and they're not consuming as much fat as their vegan peers. Females, though, have a higher risk of using veganism as an unhealthy weight control practice. Eating disorders like anorexia can become an issue. Pregnant females. If you are a pregnant female, you need to consult with a physician about the need to take a B12 vitamin supplement to prevent deficiencies in the developing fetus. Remember, there are things that we can only get from meat products, and if you're a developing fetus, you need them even more than an adult would. So you've got to consult a physician, you've got to talk to them about what you need to do to make sure that the baby is safe. For lactating females, they can produce milk that is lacking in B12. This lack can cause severe developmental delays associated with neurological damage in the baby. Again, you're going to need to talk to the physician about taking B12 supplements, or the baby is going to need to be provided with a B12 supplement. Okay, meatless menu planning. There are many common items such as pizza and lasagna that can be prepared without meat. You don't have to include things like, beef or pork or poultry in these dishes, or fish. You can really easily alter things to change them into vegan alternatives. Commercially prepared vegetarian foods are often available in the frozen food sections, things like Boca and Morningstar, Sunshine burgers. These are all vegan burgers, sausages, chicken burgers. Look and taste like their non-vegan counterparts. They do not contain cholesterol and actually may be lower in saturated fat. There's a brand called Impossible, and they actually make a soy-based alternative called leg hemoglobin. So it's actually a hemoglobin version that is in plants, and they make chicken tenders, they make ground beef that you can make, ground beef that you can make hamburgers out of. As well as that, though, they contain, I already said that. Some restaurants will offer vegan options, or they can omit or substitute meat in a dish if you ask them. So, meatless menu ideas. Cook pasta with marinara sauce and grated cheese as opposed to meat. Vegetable lasagna with layers of cheese, thinly sliced zucchini, mushrooms, and bell peppers. Vegetable stir fries, and instead of having meat, add bits of tofu. Grilled vegetable kebabs with cooked rice and black beans. So you've got onion, you've got bell pepper, you've got mushroom. Black or red bean burritos, red bean or corn tacos. So instead of having meat, you have beans. Remember, beans are pretty high in protein, so it makes a good alternative. Protein adequacy. Discuss the potential health problems that may occur with excessive protein intake. Explain why protein energy malnutrition is a serious nutritional state, especially for young children. And I am sorry I am wiggling around so much. I kind of fell really, really hard on my rear end, and I've bruised my tailbone, so I'm kind of uncomfortable. Sorry about that. Just because protein is needed for proper growth and good health doesn't mean that more is always better. I think a lot of people think, well, if one's good, 50 is great. No. You just need the adequate amount to keep you healthy. That's it. In many other parts of the world, the lack of food containing high-quality proteins is actually a serious problem, particularly when it comes to kids, when it comes to children that have higher needs because they're growing and adding tissue. Because they aren't getting the proper amount of protein, it interferes with normal growth and development and actually contributes to a lot of childhood deaths. In Africa, Cambodia, and the Philippines, many will eat locusts when they're plentiful, because sometimes they're not, because they are actually 60% protein in their dry weight. That means that for them, it is an excellent protein source. Would I eat locusts? Probably not, unless there was nothing else. But if you are in a country that has issues finding enough protein in the diet, it's definitely beneficial to have an alternative source. Excessive protein intake. High protein diets are generally not recommended. Excess protein intake can lead to higher than normal urinary losses of calcium. It can also lead to dehydration. It's unclear if calcium loss contributes to poor bone health, though. Dehydration happens because kidneys need more water to dilute and eliminate the toxic waste products of the amino acid metabolism in urine. Remember the urea we talked about earlier? I can't just straight up urinate urea. It has to be diluted in water. Because I've got so much excess urea, I'm pulling water out of the body. That means that the body ends up being dehydrated. So it can be dangerous as far as your dehydration. It can also be dangerous because, again, it makes you lose calcium. Now, protein-rich foods are high in purines. It is a nitrogen-containing chemical that is broken down by the liver from uric acid. It's also part of our DNA and our RNA. High blood uric acid levels can lead to something called gout. It is a type of arthritis, and you can actually see the uric acid crystals here that are building up in the bones of this poor person's toe. High uric acid can also contribute to kidney stones. Kidney stones are very painful. The thing that they usually compare them to is being in labor, so they are not a fun thing to experience. Plus, because it is a sharp crystal-like stone, it can actually do damage to the kidney over time. So again, you got to be careful. Protein is great, but you don't want to overdo it. What about high protein weight loss diets, such as Atkins, Protein Power, Paleo, that promote high protein intake? It may reduce feelings of hunger and increase a sense of fullness after meals. Protein usually takes longer to go through your digestive system, so it kind of sits there longer, making you feel full for longer. It may promote the loss of excess body fat if combined with the reduction in total calorie intake. So I can't eat as much protein as I want and expect that I'm going to lose weight because it's still calories. And if I'm consuming too many calories, my body's going to convert it into fat. It's not going to help in that case. They're often difficult to maintain, though, for long periods of time. After losing weight, high plant protein intake from nuts, legumes, starchy and non-starchy vegetables, fruits, and non-dairy beverages is kind of associated with maintaining that weight, though. People who get off of these diets tend to really quickly get back into eating carbs and stuff, and it goes right back to where it was. What about protein and amino acid supplements? They're actually a relatively recent trend, and little is known about the long-term safety of the use of these because they haven't been in use long enough to have data on it. Protein deficiency. It's pretty uncommon in the United States to have protein deficiency, but the population in the United States that seems to have the biggest issue with this are older adults and people who are living in low incomes. Most older adults who have retired are on a fixed income. That means they only get so much money, and whatever that money is all the money that they have. And as we get older, we tend to have to be on things like medications. So for some older adults, it literally comes down to, do I get my life-saving medication or do I get food? And for them, the life-saving medication keeps them alive. So they kind of skimp on the food, and then they end up in a protein deficiency because, again, one of the most expensive items we get at the grocery store is our meat products, our protein products. So it's this vicious cycle that we have of they don't have enough money, they need their medication, they're going to buy cheapy things, and of course meat is not cheap, so they don't get it and they end up in protein deficiency. Protein deficiency, protein undernutrition, chronic and acute diseases. People with chronic diseases like cancer, they're often accompanied by mild to moderate chronic inflammation in the body, and that actually, as I've said before, when we're injured, increases protein requirements. Their bodies may be using the proteins to aid in the inflammatory response, and instead of kind of shunting that to maintenance of body tissues, now we're shunting it to the inflammatory response. So we're not replacing red blood cells, we're not keeping our bones healthy, we're using this for that inflammatory response. That can be an issue. Many experience a decrease in appetite as well, and the ability to chew may be compromised. When we go through chemotherapy, when we have cancer, you can end up with sores in your mouth, you can end up feeling nauseous, and you don't want to eat. They'll normally have higher than normal protein requirements because of the inflammatory response. And then you've got the added issue of they don't have much of an appetite, and because they have sores in their mouth, they don't want to put food in their mouth and chew because it's painful. When this happens, they may need nutritional and medical intervention from a trained registered dietitian to diagnose the fact that they've got this undernutrition of protein and to treat their protein malnutrition. They may need to be put on a specialized diet. They may need to go in for intravenous fluids or nutrients. It may just depend on what the situation is for that particular patient.